According to historians, the first account of crucifixion occurred around 519 BC. It is believed that crucifixion originated with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. There is also historical evidence that the Persians practiced crucifixion during the 6th century BC. Historical records also indicate that Alexander the Great, who eventually invaded Persia as he was building his empire, introduced the practice to the eastern Mediterranean countries in the 4th century BC. Historical records indicate that the Romans did not learn of crucifixion until the 3rd century BC, although the Roman Jewish historian Josephus in 4 BC wrote of the time in which Roman general Varus crucified 2,000 Jews. There are also historical accounts stating that after the condemned was scourged by the Roman soldiers, the crossbeam was then tied across their shoulders, and they were then forced to carry this crossbeam to the location at which they would be crucified. The account indicates that the crosspole remained at this location, and upon arrival, the crossbeam was then attached, and at this point, the criminal was then lifted up into the air for the purpose of crucifixion. So, historical records indicate that the practice of crucifixion was being conducted up to 500 and possibly 600 years before Jesus Christ arrived on the earth. Nonetheless, history indicates that over a period of 500 years, it was the Romans that perfected the practice of crucifixion. History reveals that it was Roman Emperor Constantine I, who himself converted to Christianity, that abolished the practice of crucifixion sometime in the 4th century AD. In summary, we've learned that the crucifixion for execution method was being practiced for possibly up to 600 years prior to Jesus' birth. The historical account of Constantine I teaches us that crucifixion continued for approximately more than 300 years after Jesus' death. The Jehovah's Witnesses adamantly believe that Jesus' method of crucifixion did not include the use of a crossbeam, but instead they teach that he was simply nailed to an upright stake. Do the Jehovah's Witnesses base this claim on archaeological findings, or could there have been a more sinister reason for this claim? Let's take a look for ourselves and see if archaeology can help us to settle this absolutely pointless debate. In 1857, archaeologists examining the ruins of the Roman Palatine discovered a curious engraving into one of the walls. The engraving appears to be a depiction of a young man worshiping a donkey that has been crucified. The archaeologists date the picture to approximately 200 years after Jesus' death. Clearly, in this picture, the method of crucifixion includes a crossbeam. It is believed that this engraving was intended to mock one of the prisoners who was a professed believer in Jesus Christ. In 1873, French scholar Charles Clement Guenot discovered a burial chamber located on the Mount of Olives. The chamber contained 30 stone containers, and each contained the bones of a different person. The name Judah was found written on one of these containers. Also on this container was a cross that had arms of equal lengths. During the examination of this chamber, the name Jesus was found 3 times. 2 of these times, the name Jesus was also associated with pictures of a cross. It is very important to note that after the Second Jewish Revolt, the Jews around 135 AD were forbidden by the Romans to be in this area. This is an indication that these Christian Jews, who were clearly followers of Christ, were buried there within 135 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. Again, archaeologists provides evidence that a crossbeam was indeed used in the crucifixion of Jesus. In 1939, during excavations at Herculaneum, which was destroyed by a volcano in 78 AD, archaeologists discovered a room that contained a wall on which a cross was nailed. The area surrounding this cross was indicative of a type of shrine or a place of worship. In 1945, Professor E.L. Sukenik of the Museum of Jewish Antiquities at Hebrew University made the following discovery. Upon finding the tomb of a family, Professor Sukenik discovered that two of the containers which held bones also had the name Jesus written in Greek. One of these containers also had 4 large crosses drawn on it. Mr. Sukenik concluded that the depictions of the crosses and the inscriptions were an expression of grief in regards to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Again, the crosses also contained crossbeams. Based on pottery and lamps found in the tomb, along with the characters of the letters used in the inscriptions, the tomb was dated back to the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD. This would mean the tomb dated back to within 2 decades of Christ's crucifixion. Again, archaeologists suggest, or provides evidence, that Jesus indeed died on a cross and not a simple upright stake, as the Jehovah's Witnesses claim. So why do the Jehovah's Witnesses insist that Jesus died on a stake despite the overwhelming archaeological evidence that provides otherwise? Stay with me and let's move forward. It was early May of 1918 when U.S. Attorney General Thomas Watt Gregory ruled that the Watchtower publication titled The Finished Mystery was actually an anti-American propaganda publication. Attorney General Gregory ruled the publication was actually intended to undermine the U.S. government. Joseph Rutherford, along with 7 other Watchtower directors, were charged and arrested under the 1917 Espionage Act. They were accused of attempting to cause the insubordination, disloyalty, refusal of duty in the armed forces, and obstructing recruitment and enlistment services of the U.S. government during wartime. On June 21st of 1918, Rutherford, along with the 7 other directors, were each found guilty and each sentenced to 20 years in prison. In March of 1919, after serving just 10 months in prison, Rutherford and the directors were released on bail because an appeals court ruled they were wrongly convicted. They were notified in May of 1920 that the government had dropped all of the charges. It is reported from several former Jehovah's Witnesses that knew Joseph Rutherford personally that upon his release from prison, he was angry with the clergy and blamed them for his incarceration. William J. Schnell, author of the book titled 30 Years a Watchtower Slave, alludes to Rutherford's anger with the so-called churches of Christendom in Chapter 2, Paragraph 1 of his book. Mr. Schnell was born in 1905 and joined the organization in 1921 at the age of 16. Mr. Schnell served at Bethel while in Germany and witnessed firsthand as a strategy was implemented by Rutherford for the purpose of stripping witnesses of their individualism. Of course, the true intent of this strategy would ultimately serve the purpose of convincing the faithful witnesses to submit to the organization's implementation of theocratic rule. Mr. Schnell, while serving at Bethel as he resided in Germany, says he met Joseph Rutherford several times. Mr. Schnell says that upon his release from prison, Rutherford, blaming the so-called churches of Christendom with his imprisonment, decided he had to get revenge. What was his plan and how would he implement it? At their 1926 London Convention, Judge Rutherford announced that God has an organization, and he has had an organization from the beginning. Rutherford further explained that Satan hijacked God's organization and began using it for himself. It is no secret that the Jehovah's Witnesses teach and believe that every religious entity and worldly organization operating outside of their own are operating under Satan's earthly organization. This earthly organization is also referred to as the worldwide empire of false religion. In the previous video titled The Paradise Book Part 6, The Origin of False Religion, we learned that all religions, except of course the Jehovah's Witnesses, found their origins at the Tower of Babel. So at the 1926 London Convention, Judge Rutherford announced that God has an organization and Satan has an organization as well. And of course, the implication is that God's organization can only be found within the movement that at that time was still known as the Bible students. But Rutherford soon ran into some problems with this claim that had to be rectified. Although the Bible students claimed to be God's organization, there were several characteristics that from the outside looking in appeared eerily similar to Satan's organization. Those practicing Christianity under Satan's organization believed as well as the Bible students did that Jesus died on a cross. In order to manipulate the minds and convince others that under Rutherford the movement was truly God's organization, changes had to be made for the purpose of distinguishing the religion from those practicing Christianity under Satan's organization. At their 1931 convention held in Columbus, Ohio, Rutherford announced that moving forward, the organization would be known as Jehovah's Witnesses. It was also in 1931, under Rutherford's direction, the organization would no longer follow the belief, as so-called false religion does, that Jesus died on a cross. According to William J. Schnell, Rutherford blamed the clergy of that day with his 1919 incarceration, and labeling all other religions as belonging to Satan was actually his attempt at getting revenge. Therefore, Rutherford labeled the cross as a symbol of paganism and replaced it with the stake. This decision was nothing short of a marketing strategy employed by Rutherford for the purpose of projecting his religion as being different from those practicing religion under Satan's organization. So basically what we're finding out here is that Rutherford he made this claim that he was now the leader of God's organization on earth and all this, his restored organization and all of this nonsense. And then he has to make it believable in people's minds. So there's certain characteristics now. He's labeled the outside religions that are truly practicing Christianity. There are false religions out there. I'm not going to get into all that. But he even included the ones who were practicing Christianity and claimed that they're all false religion. The worldwide empire of false religion, all this nonsense. And there were several characteristics that they were practicing that his religion was practicing as well, so he had to make some changes so that he could distinguish a difference in the minds of the followers, the Jehovah's Witnesses of that day. He had to paint that there's a difference between his religion and these outside religions in order to manipulate their minds into believing what he was claiming. You can take a fat pig and you can put a dress on it, you can put heels on it, and you can put makeup on it. But at the end of the night, when you take all of that off, you've just still got a nasty pig. You haven't improved the pig's image at all whatsoever. It just looked good for a little while. I want to kind of get off topic here for just a moment. I had someone comment in the comments section that when I left the Jehovah's Witnesses and went into Christianity, that I traded one cult for another because religion in itself is just a farce. Well, you're correct. Religion is a farce. Christianity is not. I am a Christian. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. I am a practicer of Christianity, and I'm not embarrassed or afraid to admit it. In the Bible, there were several accounts of people having to cast demons out of other people. Jesus himself did it. The apostles did it, or what have you. So I just want to share a quick story for you, really quick, that I experienced while I was in church one day. This homeless guy just appears out of nowhere. And he walks straight up to the stage during the message while the pastor is preaching, and a non-human voice comes out of him and just begins to spew insults at the pastor while the pastor is on the stage and he's preaching. The pastor recognized immediately what it was. I was behind the camera. I was working in the media booth, and I had this on video for the longest time. I don't know where it's at right now, but I had it on video, and I listened to it many times. I could not explain the voice that was coming out of this man other than it was a demon, and he was possessed. So the pastor steps down off of the stage. He walks down and he puts his hand on the man's head and he starts praying for deliverance. And he casts that demon out and tells it to leave in the name of Jesus. After a few minutes, this man was in his right mind. And he told the pastor, he said, "I was passing your church." He said, an angel appeared to me and told me to step inside this church because there was a man of God in here that would cast this demon out of me. When you have an experience like that, and you've actually heard that voice, that demonic voice, speak through that person, and then you watch him get set free from it, and then you see that person speaking in their own right mind, this thing called Christianity becomes a whole lot more real to you. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses will say, well, that's never happened at a Kingdom Hall because they're arrogant and they think that they're above Satan and everything else. I would dare to say that the enemy has no reason to attack what already belongs to him. Just saying. Again, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to everyone for interacting with me and commenting and giving me the encouragement and what have you. Stay with me for the next video. We're going to discuss the true reason they chose the name Jehovah's Witnesses, which is, to some people, this is just going to be unbelievable. This is it's amazing. I can't wait to share it with you. So I'm planning to get that done on the next video. I've already started on it. Also, I've already got the script and everything taken care of. So I'm going to be sharing that in the next video. So stay with me. Join me. Again, I appreciate everybody, interacting with me and viewing this channel and what have you. So I will see you in the next video, and I hope to get that done within the next week. It might be 2 weeks. I'm hoping to get it done within the next week. But nonetheless, I will see you then.